Often overshadowed by more renowned tanks, the Panzer IV stood as the true workhorse of German armored forces. It served on every front, from the outset to the war's conclusion, enduring the North African deserts and the Soviet Union's frozen landscape. Inside, it transformed young men into either hardened veterans or tragic casualties, leaving behind countless grim tales. The Panzer IV story began in January 1934. While the Reich remained restricted by the Treaty of Versailles, German military planners subtly requested specifications for a new medium tractor, a thinly veiled designation for a medium tank. Under their revolutionary Blitzkrieg doctrine, the Wehrmacht required a support vehicle to accompany its other units, providing direct, high-explosive fire. The Panzer I and II were intended for infantry engagement, while the Panzer III, with its 37mm gun, would act as the primary anti-tank weapon. The Panzer IV, then termed an accompanying vehicle, was designed to complement these, bridging the gap in high explosive capabilities with its short-barreled 75mm gun. A practical design was selected, and production commenced, partly due to early industrial limitations. The initial Panzer IV model, A, featured only 15mm of frontal armor and leaf spring suspension, a less advanced system than the torsion bar suspensions preferred by German engineers, yet considerably simpler to produce. Only 35 Model A tanks were manufactured before subsequent improvements, including additional armor plates and enhancements to the engine and visibility, were implemented. Then came the infamous date of September 1, 1939. Germany possessed just over 200 Panzer IVs within its total fleet of 2,700 tanks. These were sparingly distributed, with 20 to 30 tanks per division. Poised to astonish the world, Panzer crews spearheaded the new Lightning War, advancing through Poland continuously for 72 hours. Their ability to remain alert and combat-ready for 3 days was often attributed to Pervitin, a German term for methamphetamine pills, primarily issued to tank crews, especially drivers. This created the image of an entire mechanized force, fueled by government-approved stimulants, charging into battle. However, the effectiveness of German forces stemmed not primarily from drug use, but from highly coordinated operations involving all branches of the army. The Panzer IV performed its intended role effectively, supporting other tanks with its howitzer, which quickly proved its worth. Its armor, however, emerged as its most significant vulnerability, unable to withstand contemporary anti-tank weapons. During the later invasion of France, encounters with French Charlie I tanks confirmed that the 75mm howitzer was ineffective against heavy armor. Yet, this was not a primary design flaw, as the tank was never intended for anti-tank combat. Despite its initial role, the Panzer IV was destined to become the primary workhorse, and its story was about to take a dramatic turn. Production escalated, reaching over 8,500 units across all models by the war's end. Only the Sturmgeschütz, a fully tracked assault gun, surpassed the Panzer IV in German production. With approximately 10,000 units, Panzer IV crews faced a harsh reality on the Eastern Front in 1941. The German High Command had anticipated another rapid victory, and initially operations unfolded as expected. However, tank crews soon encountered Soviet T-34s and KV tanks, which proved virtually invulnerable to most German weaponry available at the time, with the exception of the 88mm flak anti-aircraft cannons. Conversely, their own panzers were being penetrated by Soviet 76mm high-velocity guns. Hitler, reviewing these urgent reports, made one of his rare pragmatic military decisions. Initially, the Panzer III was upgunned from a 37mm to a 50mm cannon, but this also rapidly became obsolete, since the Panzer III, designed for anti-tank combat, could not accommodate anything larger than a 50mm gun due to its smaller turret ring. Hitler ordered the development of a high-velocity 75mm gun for the Panzer IV, which boasted a 12-inch larger turret ring. This led to the F2 variant, equipped with a formidable version of the renowned 7.5cm Pak-40, now capable of penetrating 77mm of armor at 1,1800 meters. Consequently, the Panzer IV transformed dramatically from its original design, adopting a weapon diametrically opposed to the 75mm howitzer. This shift profoundly impacted the crews. Initially trained for tracked artillery support, they suddenly found themselves operating a high-velocity gun, effectively becoming a dedicated anti-tank weapon and a main battle tank. While the crews found some relief in finally having a fighting chance against the formidable Soviet tanks, they were thrust into an even more perilous role, confronting an unending supply of enemy armor on all fronts. The Panther, designed from the ground up with sloped armor specifically for anti-tank warfare, was arguably one of the best anti-tank platforms. The Panther was intended to supersede the Panzer IV in its medium tank role. However, the Panther's expedited production for the Battle of Kursk led to numerous design flaws being overlooked and discovered in combat, compelling the Panzer IV to continue bearing the brunt of frontline duties. Its robust initial design provided significant potential for upgrades. An additional 30mm armor plate was bolted directly onto the original 50mm frontal hull armor, and distinctive Schürzen or side skirts were added to protect against anti-tank rifles. These skirts also proved effective at prematurely detonating the shaped charges of American bazookas before they reached the main armor, although crews often found them easily torn off when navigating dense terrain. Upgraded versions of the frontal armor became sufficiently strong to deflect the 75mm medium-velocity shells of Sherman tanks. By late 1942, the Panzer IV confronted new adversaries in North Africa. The F2 and G variants earned the moniker Panzer IV Specials among British tankers, who quickly recognized their formidable firepower. At Kasserine Pass in February 1943, these tanks destroyed over 20 M3 Grants and early model Shermans with minimal losses. The Panzer IV's longer L-48 gun could readily penetrate a Sherman's frontal armor from over 1,000 meters, whereas a Sherman's 75mm gun required closing to within 500 meters to have any chance against the Panzer IV's enhanced glacis plate. Combat in North Africa presented unique challenges for all tankers, including Panzer IV crews. Both machines and personnel were pushed to their limits by extreme daytime heat and nighttime cold, compounded by pervasive flies and sand. Interior temperatures often surpassed 50 degrees Celsius, or 22 degrees Fahrenheit. The five-man crew fought within what was essentially an oven, surrounded by ammunition, equipment, and their own perspiration. Metal surfaces were too hot to touch with bare skin, and it was said they could cook eggs on their armor. Crews often prioritized fighting over fuel and water above all else. Sand and dust contaminating lubricant oil could transform grease into an abrasive paste, leading to jammed guns, disintegrated tracks, and engines that would overheat or seize. In the vast desert, a broken-down panzer often meant certain death or capture, thus motivating crews to meticulously improvise repairs. By early 1943, the Afrika Korps found itself trapped in Tunisia, outnumbered and severed from supply lines, as the Allies launched their decisive offensive. With no escape route, and defeat becoming inevitable, orders were issued to destroy all remaining panzers to prevent their capture by Allied forces. One veteran described his crew pouring sand into the fuel tank, running the engine until it seized, then hammering rocks into the barrel, loading a high-explosive shell, and remotely firing the gun with a string. This rendered the tank completely useless to the enemy, with a destroyed engine and an exploded gun. However, most veteran Panzer crewmen would identify the Eastern Front as their most arduous posting. Beyond accounting for 75% of all Panzer losses, the sheer nature of the front and its combat conditions were utterly horrifying. Massive waves of seemingly endless Soviet tanks charging in close combat shattered the morale of many tankers. Sub-zero temperatures, dropping to -40 degrees Celsius, coupled with snow and mud, wreaked havoc on the tanks. Just as the heat and sand plagued Africa, the extreme cold of the Eastern Front caused immense problems. Transmission fluid became so viscous it required heating with torches for up to an hour before the tank could even move. The Maybach engine's starter system frequently failed, forcing crews to ignite small fires beneath the engine, then rely on the inertia hand-cranked starter. Even fuel and grease could freeze, making the simple act of preparing the tank for operation a formidable task. Crews improvised methods to somewhat warm their tanks overnight, often sleeping inside and inhaling gasoline fumes to avoid freezing to death, while frostbite was a prevalent affliction. Ammunition storage presented another dire challenge for the crews. The Panzer IV carried between 80 and 87 rounds of 75mm ammunition, depending on the variant, which was stored in bins throughout the fighting compartment, including highly vulnerable positions in the hull sides. Unlike later American tanks with their wet ammunition storage, which significantly reduced the risk of secondary explosions, a penetrating hit on a Panzer IV frequently triggered catastrophic secondary explosions. German tankers morbidly referred to being hit as brewing up, a darkly humorous euphemism for the tank bursting into flames as ammunition detonated, granting crews at best only seconds to cake. Numerous photographs online depict the grim aftermath where crews failed to egress in time. Imagine witnessing such a scene as a tanker operating the same type of vehicle, knowing that an identical fate could befall you at any moment. By 1943, Soviet IS-2 heavy tanks and upgraded T-34s equipped with 85mm guns started appearing on the battlefield. The Panzer IV Model H attempted to counter these threats with additional armor, but its capabilities were inherently limited, as the tank now weighed over 25 tons, significantly exceeding its original 16-ton design. On the Western Front, following the Normandy invasion, Panzer IVs engaged extensively with Allied Shermans and Churchills. However, the greater threat to German armor came not from enemy tanks themselves, but from superior Allied artillery, handheld anti-tank weapons, and ground attack aircraft that effectively terrorized them. As resources diminished, quality inevitably declined. The final variant, the Model J, introduced in March 1944, represented a regressive step. Its auxiliary 200-liter fuel tank was relocated into the crew compartment to extend operational range, inadvertently increasing its vulnerability to fires. The powered turret traverse system was entirely removed, forcing gunners to manually crank the turret. Consequently, a full 360-degree rotation now required at least 60 seconds, a stark contrast to the mere 15 seconds achieved with powered traverse. Due to rubber shortages, road wheels were fabricated entirely from steel, leading to a distinct reputation for audible squeaking tracks that could be heard miles away. Manganese shortages also rendered all late-war German tank armor brittle, and even paint supplies became scarce. Often, only the upper fighting compartment was painted white for visibility, while the lower sections received only anti-rust protection. With factories heavily damaged by bombing raids, spare parts grew so rare that units regularly resorted to cannibalizing other vehicles to keep other tanks operational. This interoperability was a notable advantage, as all Panzer IV variants utilized standardized and interchangeable parts, allowing older models to be easily fitted with components from newer versions and vice versa. With factories in ruins and resources dwindling, the concluding chapters of the Panzer IV's history underscored the Reich's deepening desperation. Panzer crew training was drastically cut from the original 16-week program to a mere 4 weeks. Late production tanks frequently lacked essential intercom systems. Driver training before combat deployment was also curtailed, leading to widespread transmission failures as inexperienced operators mishandled the delicate gearboxes. Young crews, with barely 3 weeks of instruction, were thrown into battle against seasoned Allied and Soviet tankers. The life expectancy of a Panzer IV crew on the Eastern Front plummeted to approximately 2 weeks. While the Tiger tank, an over-engineered marvel, offered a glimmer of desperate hope to the Germans, the grim reality was that for every operational Tiger on the front lines, there were 20 Panzer IVs. Furthermore, the average operational readiness rate for Panzer IVs stood at 62% compared to a mere 37% for Tigers, meaning over half of the Tigers on the battlefield were non-functional. As Germany strived to utilize all available resources, Panzer IV hulls were repurposed for various other vehicles, including the Jagdpanzer IV, Sturmgeschütz IV, and even the Sturmpanzer IV with its 50mm gun. As the war situation worsened, pervasive fuel shortages and a lack of spare parts meant that tanks were simply abandoned when they broke down. The once proud spearhead of the Blitzkrieg had devolved into static pillboxes, dug into defensive positions as the Third Reich crumbled around them. Yet remarkably, the Panzer IV's story did not conclude with Germany's surrender. Over 300 vehicles had been supplied to Nazi allies during the war. Syria, for instance, even deployed Panzer IVs against Israel in 1967 during the initial phases of the Six-Day War, thus bringing to an end a remarkable 30-year combat career for a tank initially designed for infantry support in 1936. Today, only 29 Panzer IVs remain preserved in museums worldwide. When contemplating these battle-worn veterans, it is crucial to remember they were more than just machines. They represent the men who lived, fought, and died within these cramped steel confines.